Untamed is going to be untamed. It's going to be a little crazy. I want to talk to my people. I want to talk to my brothers and sisters. We can have grace and humility in how we interact with other people.
Oh, hot dog, look at you.
And nobody talked about what's really happening.
And let's have conversations about what truth is.
An Oregon man was convicted and sent to jail for collecting and using rainwater on his own property, sued by the state for theft. Rancher Gary Harrington built 3 large reservoirs on his own land to collect rainwater and snow melt. He claimed the water was primarily for fire protection reserves and for providing water to wildlife. But the state called it theft and prosecuted Gary. A municipal code stipulates that all water within city limits, including precipitation, is part of the public water supply. The city requested the court order the removal of his collection system and impose a fine. Despite Harrington's repeated appeals, arguing, "The water fell on my land, I'm not selling it. I'm simply using it on my own property." The court ultimately rejected his claims. Harrington was found guilty on multiple charges, including unlawful appropriation of state water resources. He was sentenced to 30 days in jail and fined over $1,500. The incident sparked intense backlash. Residents said it was simply tyranny. If a person cannot own the rain that falls on their own land, what do they actually own?
Well, welcome back. We start this off with, we constantly are debating elections, and I feel like I talk about elections, and then when I'm done talking about elections, I talk about more elections. And lots of people talk about all sorts of stuff, and they ask pretty good questions, I think. You have the Sean Ryans of the world that go through the experiences people have. And, I believe that we have to pay attention to these things, but we also have to figure out where the slow boil starts and where it ends. For those of you that don't know, this story that I just put up here just now is about a man from Oregon from 2012. And so we've been dealing with a lot of the things that we deal with collectively, this slow boil towards a tyranny against the American people. And you have to ask yourself the question that if you don't own the water that falls in your land, what do you really own? Well, if you pay taxes on your property and you don't pay it, they can steal your land, then what do you really own? When they can actually do eminent domain and take things from you that they shouldn't be able to take, what do you really own? Like they basically get to decide who the haves and the have-nots are. And he was saying this back in 2012, and the reason why it's eerie, and it came up as something that I wanted to discuss today, is because when he was talking about, I don't know if we can put that article up, but he was talking about, he said the government is bullying, and he had to serve 30 days in jail, and they've just gotten to be big bullies, and you just have to lay over and die and give up, and it makes them bigger bullies. And so there's a constant theme that we're constantly dealing with right now, I have a tendency to put it all together. That an unjust law is no law at all, and we have such a rotted judiciary and we have such a rotted apparatus of government that it becomes really difficult if you get stuck in the system of how to get out. And the only people that tend to get out are people that are connected to other people in the government. They can pick up the phone and call the clerk. And you've heard me talk about this story before. You have somebody call the law clerk for a judge and say, "Hey, can you put a birdie in the judge's ear? This is the case that's coming up," and maybe be really lenient on that person. And we know that this happens. And I know that this happens because I had a friend that was headed to jail in a federal case, and I had done a bunch of work. I should say allegedly a bunch of work, but I was able to pick up the phone and call some people, and he was facing, I don't know, anywhere between probably 4 years to 8 years, let's say. He ultimately only ended up getting 6 months, and And in large part, it was because we knew someone that knew someone that knew the judge, and we just kind of meandered around until we got our friend a lesser sentence. Now, I'm not saying what I just said is right, because obviously I'm admitting that in this system, I was able to get an outcome that I wanted. Thought my friend was a pretty good guy. He got himself kind of a raw deal. So it was trying to, right the wrongs of a system that, had the big stick and wanted to beat him with it. But I think if we put it all together and we look at things in totality, it becomes very difficult to think that we live in a free country where we're any more well off. Now, we have more things. I mean, from a materialistic standpoint, the United States is filled with cheap shit from all over the world. And we have this consumerism-driven society that then creates jobs, and I guess the trickle-down theory is a real thing. But what happened was they made us fat and happy, and we had all this stuff. And then we woke up to the idea that, we have cameras on every corner of the street. And the states have passed laws where they own our children. And people were losing their jobs because they said, if you don't take this vaccine, the COVID vaccine, that you can't go to work. And by the way, everyone that takes the COVID vaccine, you won't catch COVID. So they just kept lying to the general public in order to create this test case that ended up leading to millions of Americans' lives being genocided. And we could talk about if you don't pay your property tax, they take your property tax. But if you go to war, our kids die, but your kids will die, but not mine. And they get to send their kids to private school while yours goes to get a public school education. And then in the public school education, they get to basically indoctrinate and take away from you what's never theirs. And they can tell you that there's global warming and that you need to consume less energy, but then jump on their private jet and fly all over the world. And then where this comes in for me is it comes in when we talk about Tina Peters. The system is so rotted and the judges have such discretion, and you can't do anything about a bad judge. Sure, you can throw them all off the bench. You can say, I want them all taken off. But the vast majority of people who don't have to deal with the legal system or understand the intricacies of how just unjust it is, they don't pay attention to it. I want you to see this. There's a former senator. See, I want to tell you the difference between Tina Peters and this former senator. Put this up real quick. I'm going to read this to you. Last week, former state senator Sonya Jaquez Lewis was sentenced to probation and community service after being convicted of 4 felonies, including attempt to influence a public official. She made a horrible mistake, and she was wrong. I hope she learns from this and can rebuild her life. As someone who has known Sonya as a friend for many years, on a personal level, I was glad to hear that she wasn't going to prison, which can be hard on anyone, no less a retired 68-year-old pharmacist. But it's not lost on me that she was convicted of the exact same felony charges of Tina Peters, attempting to influence a public official, and yet Tina Peters, as a nonviolent first-time offender, got a 9-year sentence. Justice in Colorado and America need to be applied evenly. You never know when you might need to depend on the rule of law. In this context, I'm using as a considered cases that have sentencing disparities, which is why I've extended the deadline for clemency applications until August or April 3rd. I'll make decisions on these cases throughout the remainder of my governorship. I want to be able to say this first and foremost. Fuck you, Polis. You're the reason why Tina Peters is in jail. You're the reason why that piece of trash judge threw the book at Tina and told her that she didn't have a First Amendment right. It's the same reason why you had a DA that was working with the AG's office that was working directly with you on how to create the maximum amount of punishment on Tina Peters, a 70-year-old Gold Star mom. You wanted to chill the ability for Americans to stand up for their fundamental rights. One, redress a grievance. Two, look into improprieties being committed by people like you and people like Phil Weiser and people like Jenna Griswold. You are the disgusting reason that Tina Peters is in jail. You are the epicenter of the fraud that exists in the state of Colorado and around the nation. You stood up for Dominion voting system while you stood against the people of Colorado. And then you want to talk to us about clemency and the fact that it's unfair? Of course it's unfair. But she was your friend, so she got probation. And this is why we talk about the rules are for thee and not for me. And by the way, don't ever stand up for an American. Don't stand up for your fellow citizens. Don't stand up for free and fair elections. Don't do anything to get outside of what we tell you to do, slave. Because if you do, we will send you to jail for 9 years. The biggest problem that I have with what he said is that he glossed over on what she did. She didn't mistakenly do anything. She didn't mistakenly do anything. I want to show you what she is guilty of. Play it.
Convicted a former Colorado senator on felony charges. That ruling was handed down yesterday for former state senator Sonya Jaquez. She was convicted on 3 counts of forgery and 1 count of attempt to influence a public servant. Lewis resigned last February when staff claimed that she was mistreating them and withheld their pay to fund her campaign. During the investigation, a letter was presented in support of Lewis, which investigators say was fake. When asked to turn over evidence of letters that were not fake, she resigned. She's expected to be sentenced next month.
We have 2 guests today. And the problem I have, I want to show you this if you could. Put up the post 5, and then we'll get into that. So former Colorado State Senator Sonya Lewis sentenced to 2 years probation, 150 hours community service for forging letters in support of herself during an ethics investigation. So she was unethical. Then she had the ethics investigation, so she had letters that said they supported her that were fake. She was convicted on 4 felony counts, and she got just probation. Meanwhile, Tina Peters, who was also convicted of 4 felonies, is sitting in prison for 9 years for exposing election fraud. Something is very wrong with Colorado. Yeah, something is not just very wrong with Colorado. They're trying to make the state pimps and create a registry for for prostitutes. So now the pimp gets to be the state, but also they can pass out this registration to all the pimps so that they can have a second layer of pimps. Because God forbid we do anything to protect women inside of our communities. No, feminism is the way to do it. I mean, that's the excuse they use. Why did she only get probation? 150 hours community service. And she will probably end up getting pardoned. Watch. It's going to happen. And I want to say this, and then we'll bring our guests on because I think it's relevant. First of all, our first guest is going to talk to us about COVID. He's an author, investigative journalist. He was the author of Entering Hades and co-author of The Courage to Face COVID-19. I believe that was with Dr. McCullough. We'll find out here in a bit. I haven't read that book. He's worked on things like the Epstein cover-up, under foreign wars, the way, from elite Epstein cover-ups, he did that to covering foreign wars and the powers that protect themselves. I think he's seen a lot. His name is John Leake. And then, obviously, a man that doesn't need any introduction to you guys is Dave Clements is going to be on talking about his recent broadcast, which was the singularity and the ancient reset, just talking about kind of what's happening with this war in Iran and what we can expect going forward. I want to give you an update on the whole Coomer deal, and I got a motion to this morning, and they keep filing different motions to stay things, not give me access to things. So I'm just going to give you this update because they're mad that I'm mad and that I keep talking. And I'm like, you've lied about me for 6 years. You went to the New York Times, you had them write some puff piece. You lied about me over and over and over again. You stood this diabolical man up on, and you knew, you had all the information. You had all the information out of the Dominion deal. You had a joint defense agreement. You had all these things that we knew, right? And then you have to admit these things 6 years in, and you've literally skewered my life over 6 years as a whistleblower with lies, only to tell me now that, oh, you can't, we need to make that information super secret from the public. And then told me that I violated a protection order, which I didn't do. I did not make any substantive, I did not tell you anything substantive about what happened in the deposition of Eric Coomer. Nothing. Everything that I have talked about over and over again was directly related to information that was released on X or in information that was a public record. So here's what I had to write to him. And his lawyers are dirty, man. His lawyers are really dirty. Go ahead, put it up. Just in, lawyers for Eric Coomer want to stop me from getting access to the settlement agreements, which, by the way, I'm representing myself because my lawyers got removed from the case because they didn't want my lawyers, or they wanted my lawyers to give up information related to the Antifa kid who happened to come forward because they tried to sanction me yet again for $1,000 a day, because the whole thing, this entire thing, is about destroying people that tell the truth. They are scared to death that I'm representing myself because my attorneys were forced off the case by a sticky, corrupt special master appointed by a corrupt judge. Polis pulls the strings and put these rotted people in their positions. I will get new counsel, but that won't stop the corruption in this meantime. Eric Coomer was the original chief architect of Sequoia voting systems in 2005. He was the center figure in the CIFIS investigation in 2006 after he and others flew 24 Venezuelan coders in for the Chicago municipal election. It was an intelligence operation that led to Smartmatic buying Sequoia and to the ownership of 17 states in the District of Columbia. This led to a forced sale and the spreading of the algos used to manipulate elections for the past 20 years. Eric Coomer flew back and forth from the U.S. to Serbia and participated in the stolen elections in other countries as well. A drug-addicted Satanist working for an apparatus of evil that stole the voice of the American people state by state, race by race, year after year after year. He moved from Venezuela. He moved from Venezuelan and CIA-owned to cartel criminal enterprise, from Sequoia voting systems to Dominion voting systems, and now Liberty Vote. Same crime family, different name. But then he bragged about it, lied about it, and then he fled the country to hide where the talk clicks on his most probable arrest. Don't worry about it. Trump's not going to win. I made fucking sure of it. Eric's attorney has propped up the lie, embroiled in the largest corruption case in Colorado history. The cartel lawyers have collected money and bullied with the help of the corrupt cartel judges. They have committed conspiracy of magnificent proportion. Only they did not count on people like me who frankly now want blood. I want them all to pay for treason and stealing the voice of the people. I'm way past just this defamation case. I'm past the slander and attacks. I want them all to have to pay for their lies and misinformation, disinformation, conspiracy theorist bullshit. I want them to pay, and pay they will. The evidence is so strong and overwhelming it would be impossible to ignore in a sane world. But that is not where we are. Evil, evil people made you all slaves. Mr. President, bring Tina Peters home and stop the bullshit narrative and lies. I know you know these people are responsible. We have reached density, and it's time to have the Caesar moment. Free the people and give us back the dignity we deserve as Americans. Free Tina Peters, no matter what it takes. Bring her home and force the arrest of these seditious demons. That was my post this morning, and then I woke up. I guess they didn't like that post because I woke up this morning to you need to look at this where you keep talking about things that are happening in the case. No, I'm talking about a case where you came after my life, you came after my wife, you came after my family, you came after my business, and you propped up a Satanist who literally runs in a building, goes in and drinks, almost kills someone driving away, and lies with impunity, and you make that the poster child for being the victim. And he's not a victim. And then you hide information, because that's what crooked lawyers do. All right, we're going to move straight for that into our guest. I think he's with us. Is he with us? John, welcome to the show. I'm going to go right into it so I can just kind of calm down and get your take on all the stuff we're dealing with. I don't know what you got to hear, but welcome to the show. I don't see him. Am I missing something? I can hear you now.
Yeah.
Move back. There you go. Perfect. There you go.
Okay. Can you see me all right?
Yes. How you doing, John?
I'm well. Thank you, Joe. Thanks for having me, and thanks for your persistence. I got off to such a rough start this year. I won't bore you with the details, but it's kind of one damn thing after another. But anyway, I'm pleased to finally make your acquaintance.
Yeah. So you live down in Texas?
I do. I live in Dallas. Peter McCullough and I, Dr. Peter McCullough, we're the co-author of 2 books together. Our most recent is Vaccines, Mythology, Ideology, and Reality. We got into this during the COVID-19 pandemic fiasco, and that's kind of how I got to know Peter, was within that context in 2020. We're practically neighbors here in Dallas. We live a couple of blocks from each other. So I do a lot of work with him, but I also do a lot of independent investigative work as well. I have a new book coming out that I think will be of interest to your audience. It's called Mind Viruses. It's a psychological history of the United States since 2001 and all of the madness that has been inflicted on us by our government for the last 25 years.
Do you think it started before that 25 years, or do you think this is a phenomenon where they decided, okay, we've studied this enough since the 1950s, now it's time to implement it and to grab hold of the American ethos?
I think it had been going on for a long time. I think a lot of these methods of dividing the people, divide and rule, they're old political techniques. I just think it's been remarkable how the assault on the American mind has been so relentless since 2001. So, I kind of needed to pick a start date. I do go far back into history as a sort of, prefatory, background. But, we get to 2001 and it just seems like the U.S. government has just been waging a continuous psychological operation on the citizenry.
So 2001 comes along, 2005, 2006. 2001 I think we had Classmates or something, and MySpace and all that stuff. And then from there we graduated into like Facebook and you had these different iterations for Twitter. Do you think that it catapulted or at least accelerated what they needed to do in order to create these mind viruses?
I think for sure. I mean, the remarkable thing about social media is, as you know, the consumer is not only watching the feed, the feed is watching him too. What are his inclinations? What does he seem to be interested in? So if you're demonstrating a susceptibility to propaganda, you can very quickly, that can be grossly amplified. And I have a whole chapter on transgender, this so-called gender dysphoria. And you see that young people, early adolescence, late childhood, early adolescence, they're very, very susceptible to social media indoctrination and manipulation.
What do you think the triggers are? I mean, do you think there are triggers? And I think this is important because, I remember my son coming home from school and he's like, Dad, Javier said that I have microaggressions of racism. And I looked at him and I was like, that's ridiculous. And it went on for like 2 weeks. And he was really bothered by the idea that maybe somewhere inside of him he was racist. And I was like, man, your grandfather's black. Will you please just shut your mouth? Seriously, isn't it a real thing? This is not a real thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously the young are so susceptible and impressionable, I should say. And then adolescence is a very unstable threshold between childhood innocence and sort of lack of awareness and adult consciousness. And, the body is rapidly changing. There are all of these hormonal changes, which can be very destabilizing of the emotions. And kids are just very susceptible. That their identity has not been formed yet. And of course, we're hypersocial. So, kids look to other kids. Well, geez, I don't know how to feel about this. What do you think? I mean, we still do that as adults. You feel uncertain about something. So, you ask your friends or you ask your wife, what do you think? And I'm glad that you asked this question, because a major theme of my book is that if you have a strong identity, and that identity could be as an individual man or woman, or a member of a community, a member of a congregation, or a citizen of a nation, if you have a strong identity, then you become less susceptible to manipulation. What we've seen since 2001 is this persistent undermining of anything like a unifying idea of our shared American culture and history and our shared American destiny. And, when you have a people that don't really know who the hell they are, it's very easy to manipulate them.
Yeah, so I mean, this just gets into the bigger, there's things that you've looked into historically, like you've talked about the Epstein files, that release under Thomas Massey, and we look at the degeneracy that we have inside of our government, or excuse me, inside of our society. I mean, you have people that know who the Kardashians are, they know who, Cardi B is, but you could ask them what the capital is of the state that they're standing in, and about 50% of the people that are under the age of 25 have zero idea, and they're going to school to learn these things only to be taught about you're a racist, you could be a pink dinosaur or a kitty cat if you want, we'll set you up a litter box, we'll do all this stuff for you. Help me understand why this would even be a thing. Like, why is our society, why are these people pushing us towards a dilapidation of society, a crumbling society that could only lead to death and destruction?
Joe, you asked very cogent questions. It's funny, the book hasn't come out yet, but you might as well have read the thing from cover to cover. I have a whole chapter on this. I mean, you go back to the founding fathers. I mean, it's so interesting. I mean, you read George Washington, you read James Madison, John Adams, and they all say, look, I mean, the citizenry has to. They don't have to all have a hyper education, but they
right.
Basic common sense, basic literacy, basic access to information about what's going on in the world, and most importantly, basic information about what their government is doing. And Madison was particularly clear on this. If a people don't have a pretty firm sense of what is going on in their community, in their nation, and they don't know what the hell their government is doing, it then just becomes a prelude to tyranny. Because a people that doesn't have any understanding of anything, that's living in a state of complete ignorance, can very easily be manipulated by tyrants. I mean, tyrants can come in and just sort of say whatever make-believe fantasy the tyrant, would have the citizens believe, and oftentimes it's couched in something that's fearful, that frightens the citizens. It gives the citizens that there's a mortal threat, or a moral threat, something that is hazardous to the moral tapestry, and so I think that it's by design that American young people are being rendered completely ignorant of everything. And not only ignorant, but constantly distracted by material of a sort of salacious tapestry. And so I think that it's by design that American young people are being rendered completely ignorant of everything, and not only ignorant, but constantly distracted by material of a sort of salacious thrilling content, but that has no actual edifying content in terms of the mind being cultivated. There was that famous, you've probably seen it, the Russian former KGB agent Yuri Bezmenov, who defected. And he gave that famous interview in 1984 with G. Edward Griffin.
Yes.
In which he talks about ideological subversion. So I mentioned that in the book. And he says, the method of ideological subversion, you start by pumping nonsense into the brains of about 2 or 3 generations of young people. And then, so through this process of rendering the minds of young people completely contentless, just nonsense, they don't know up from down, man from woman, black from white.
So is this for our generation? Would this have been MTV?
I mean, it's
I'm just kidding. Yes. Because we had MTV, we'd sit up for like 8 hours to watch music videos.
Right, or reruns of Starsky and Hutch, or But Bezmenov. It's like that interview was prophetic, and obviously, I mean, as he perceived it, the process of ideological subversion was already well underway. But, I don't think that it was until about 2015 when somebody found that old video, that old recording, and uploaded it to YouTube. It was only then that people, really said, holy smokes. I mean, this guy seems to be absolutely describing us in like surgical detail. It's like he's doing this perfect. I mean, it almost seemed like a post-mortem. It's like, wow, we are there. Like what he's warning about, we're already there. And so, he says, if you ideologically subvert particularly young people, they will have no means of coming to any sensible conclusion about what is in the interest of their lives, their families, their communities, and their nations. They're rendered completely helpless. So then tell them whatever you want to tell them. Tell their children that that little girls can become boys and boys can become girls, and whatever you want to tell them. The public becomes very, very gullible and very naive and very susceptible.
But it borderlines on the ridiculous, John. I mean, it's not, but all those things put aside, we're not talking about things that could even creep on the edge of societal norm. We're talking about things that are so far out the spectrum of societal norm that they can't even articulate the reason why they would believe such nonsense. And whether we're talking about transgenderism or we're talking about DEI or even the fact that there's radical racism, we're stuck in this political survivalism, even of the leadership that we have, that allows for them to kind of just drift from left to right and never really have some firm footing that anyone could even use as bearings to go forward. It's like being in the middle of the ocean.
It's true. It's very, very important what you say. And again, I think that's by design, because, I mean, this is what we mean by demoralization. So guys like you and I, we're presented with just absolute total nonsense. And you think, I mean, if the government would really have us believe that, and people do believe that, it's profoundly demoralizing to sensible people. And so, what's then thrust upon you is, well, you have to make a decision. Are you going to try to counter this nonsense? And consider how trying that is. I mean, it's like, this whole global warming or this climate change thing. It's like, it's very hard to have that conversation with people that have never even heard of Newton's laws of thermodynamics. They don't know anything about energy. So, like, how do you even start to have a conversation with people who are completely ignorant? And so, it requires enormous amounts of energy and patience in order to have a conversation with people if the terms of the conversation are trying to pushback, utter nonsense. So it demoralizes the sensible people, at which point they have to decide, well, maybe you're in Colorado and you probably think this sometime. Well, I think I'll just go hiking with my kids or skiing or hunting or whatever and just forget about the whole damn thing. I mean, this is just so demoralizing. And so the absurdity, I think, is by design.
So it's by design, but people are actually gravitating towards it, and there's a certain amount of exceptionism that happens to that, where they just accept that this is true, or they accept that they don't believe it's true, but they're willing to let people believe it's true and let people live in that fantasy world. Same problem that we have with transgenderism, which is super dangerous because that type of cosplay actually leads to death and destruction.
For sure.
And obviously 41% of transgender individuals attempt or are successful in committing suicide, right? So,
well, it's terrible. I mean, we saw that this mass fraud and hysteria campaign that was unleashed on our people with this fraudulent messenger RNA COVID-19 vaccine. I mean, this is the theme of big theme of our book, but there you are again. I mean, people just lack the most basic knowledge about immunology. The idea that this genetic technology is going to confer better immunity than actually catching the illness, going through. It's very mild for most people. Most people, by the time the vaccine had rolled out, a very substantial portion of the population had already gotten through the illness. So the idea, well, you got through the illness, your immune system was exposed to the entire virus and all of its antigens, but that natural immunity that you've acquired is inferior to our new shot. I mean, anybody who's studied the most elementary, immunology knows that can't be true. It's a complete preposterous statement. But there again, a lot of people, they knew they'd gotten through COVID-19. They knew they'd already had the bug, but they still went out and got the vaccine.
Well, that leads me to a conversation that I had with Dr. Heidi, who is an immunologist, and I remember at the beginning part of COVID, I had a conversation. I called her first. It was in March of 2020, and I was like, "Listen, I didn't do it. I had biology class. I remember going and going to some science classes in school, and I remember the things that they talked about. And I played the game. There's this game you can play online that it has viruses and you launch them everywhere, and then it escalates to different things. And the goal is to destroy the entire world in this little game you have on your phone. And so I said, but isn't it true that the virus mutates, and as it mutates, it gets weaker? And she's like, yes. And I go, then why the hell will we try to chase a virus with a vaccine? And what could be the consequences of doing that in the future? And she goes, well, the consequence of doing that in the future is that you could create a super virus as a result of it that could end up killing even more people. And frankly, it's really not a good thing to do over time. You should find a way to have prophylactics. So she's telling me about prophylactics, telling me about things you can take, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, at the beginning. Fast forward 8 months later, I'm having a conversation with her, and she goes, no, you don't understand. This is different. And I'm like, different than what we learned about with viruses for the last 20 years? And she goes, well, this virus is different. It needs a vaccine because it's global. And I'm like, so the vaccine decided it could take it a bus and a plane and a train, and that made it more sophisticated. It learned math. So now it knows how to get stronger after it gets weaker. And remember, they tried to convince us, John, that we have this strand is stronger than this one, and that this one's going to be the super one. And a year and a half later, they were telling us to put back on masks and do all these things, even though we knew that it's just not true.
Everything was a lie, and people who understood virology and understood immunology knew that it was a lie. The whole thing is a fraud. I mean, this. But
even my friend was an immunologist, and she changed. She like decided that she was going to become a kooky. I can't even talk to her anymore.
Yeah, she must have somehow been indoctrinated or brainwashed or something. She probably isn't very smart to begin with, because, I mean, if you understand how this messenger RNA vaccine actually works, I mean, the mechanism that is actually described by and characterized by the people that made it and introduced it, it's very evident that what she is saying cannot be true. And moreover, some of these vaccine apostles like Sanjay Gupta on CNN and Paul Offit, who's the sort of high priest of vaccines, they themselves have admitted that this entire slandering and maligning of natural immunity was completely bogus. I mean, it took them 5 years to do it, but I mean, I suppose better late than never. So it's not even, I mean, it's not even a matter of concealment at this point. I mean, it is just the reality of the situation that this was a bogus assertion. And it was a bogus assertion made, to the great harm of people. If you've already had a viral illness and then you go and you get a vaccine against it, you can have situations in which the immune system is primed to then overreact to the vaccine. So we have Dr. McCullough's cardiologist. We have a long list of people who have come to us, young people, young athletes. They got through COVID. They had the illness. It was mild, but it was symptomatic. They had it. It was PCR confirmed. They got over it. But then they were bullied to go get a vaccine with this bogus claim that natural immunity isn't as good as vaccine immunity. When they got the shot, they had an aggressive immune overreaction to it and developed myocarditis, heart inflammation. We saw this in many cases. So it's not only false, it was actually a dangerous assertion. And, anytime the U.S. government gets involved in one of these big mass hysteria psychological operations, it's just devastating. The harm that's done to the citizenry is devastating. But before the citizenry has a chance to sort of wise up, to evaluate, and to kind of come to terms with what's happened, we're off to the next adventure. Suddenly Ukraine or global warming or racism or whatever it is, we're constantly being presented with a fresh boogeyman in order to draw our attention away from the act of fraud that has been committed against us. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And this is, when we start, and I don't want to even look at it just in the context of COVID or viruses or any of that stuff, because if you look at, that's just kind of like the epicenter for 2020. It kind of is at the jumping off point, almost as if a sleeper cell had been sitting there saying, okay, we've infected all of these minds. And now we're going to launch and we're going to make every mother go against father and brother and sister. And we're going to split families and create divides. And then we're going to have the boogeyman. I felt like that's what happened. And in large part, they use this as a jumping off point on the medical side. But it'd be hard. You also have to look at this from the standpoint of how they've been able to shift focus by creating this fear. Remember Henny Penny?
No.
The sky is falling, right? The idea that we're the Chicken Little, right? The sky is falling. The sky is falling. The sky is falling.
The sky is falling. Yeah, so sure.
It started out with Henny Penny, then it turned into Chicken Little, and then they make commercials about it and cartoons, right? But that the sky can't fall. But they actually were able to convince people in closed environments that somehow the sky was caving in on people. Because remember, there was this experiment in Nevada that they did where they had 300 people in there and they had it's cloud cover, and they said, oh, the clouds are too low and it's going to collapse on top of each other and we have to get in. And so they forced people into this underground deal, and there was only 3 people that questioned it. And the other 197 were like, you're crazy, you're going to die. And they literally turned against each other in large numbers. And a vast majority of them, when they were brought out of the hole and told, hey, listen, by the way, we made it all up, they still believed that the sky was going to fall.
Yes, well, one of the things that I go into great detail in my new book, Mind Viruses, is in President Eisenhower's farewell address of 1961. It's most known for what he says about the military-industrial complex acquiring undue influence, and that was for sure the case. But I think, in many ways, equally interesting is his explication of what he calls the scientific technological elite. And it's a very sophisticated explication. He says, for a long time, science was done by lone tinkerers and naturalists, Newton on his family farm in Cambridgeshire. But now science has been captured by the federal government and its military-industrial complex. And it's been given enormous resources, enormous prestige, and enormous authority, so much so that our representative government is oftentimes unwilling to question it. So you really saw this, Eisenhower's warning of the scientific technological elite. We saw it with the COVID pandemic response, where basically running the country was just ceded to Anthony Fauci and Deborah Birx. It's like, well, we don't really know what to do. Let's defer to the experts. Well, this is exactly what Eisenhower warned us about. And, he points out, he says, well, these experts invoke their special authority and training and education so that a guy who doesn't, a senator or a congressman or a president who doesn't share their training is then hesitant to question what he is telling them. So, Fauci could say, well, yeah, everybody needs to stand on their heads, wear a mask, get 20 boosters, and if they don't, the sky will fall. And I think most people would just believe that. I mean, I remember my brother told me, may I say something slightly vulgar on your show? Or
you are welcome to, because I want be authentic. I'll bleep it out later.
My brother was talking about this kind of slavish deference to authority, during the pandemic. And he said, I really get the feeling that if the government came out and said the proper prophylaxis against this dread virus is for everybody to start eating a dog shit sandwich every day. Yeah. He said, I bet a lot of people would actually do it. I mean, they would figure out some way to make it more palatable, and they would eat a dog shit sandwich, because the human mind can become so captured by. Now, it's important to understand the conditioning. Within the conditioning of extreme fear, the human mind will oftentimes, as a matter of deferring to authority, do whatever authority proposes will enable you to escape that mortal danger. And this is one of the things I talk about. All of these mind viruses, without exception, there's a strong element of fear.
Yeah.
To go back to transgender, I mean, this absolutely odious threat. If you don't enroll your children in gender-affirming procedures, go commit suicide and it'll be on your head. I mean, there's literally a slogan that so-called gender-affirming practitioners would say, better to have a little girl than a dead boy. That was a talking point.
Yeah.
Now, Joe, you'll probably agree with me. I mean, that's just sinister. But what kind of parent would believe that? I mean,
There are parents that believe that.
they do.
Yeah.
They do.
Yeah. I mean, this is the same philosophy when you get into school systems where you don't want to punish your children because you want them to like you, right? And so you want to feed them drugs and give them access to alcohol and let them run around and buy them a $100,000 car. This is the enablement that we've actually created, this sense of entitlement that kind of just breeds or leaks off of that same sort of ideology, right? So, and the dangers of this is that those people become non-functional. They can't function in society.
I mean, imagine. I mean, I grew up in the '80s in Texas, and it was a pretty. Parents were pretty like do it.
You had a BMX bike then.
I had a BMX. I had a dirt.
Yeah.
I had a 250cc dirt bike. I mean, I had a fast car, but it would be like if I told my parents, I'd like a machine gun, hand grenades, and a top fuel dragster. And if you don't give it to me, or I want to be a top fuel dragster, I mean, parents just say, "Well, shut up." I mean, like, yeah. But what has happened in parenting, where every just preposterous thing that kids, invoke that they need in order to be happy? I mean, I don't have kids, so do you have any insight into this?
I do. I told my daughter and my son. My daughter was, she had just turned 11, and my son was 9 years old. He had just turned she had just turned 11, so he was 8, and we were talking about drugs. And I looked at them both, and I was like, "If you ever do drugs, I will tie you to the front bumper of the car, drive you around in a snowstorm till you die. I will not let you die slowly. I will make it happen really, really fast. Are we clear?" Right? I said it just like that. And they're like, "Yes, Dad." And as they're walking away from me, and I'm thinking to myself, look, I have a great relationship with both of my children. I mean, amazing. I don't get off the phone without telling them I love them. I love my family very much. But I put the rules. I set the rules. I didn't have to spank my kids because I would give them the look. Like, I'm going to tear you out of your skin. You want to try that? Try that one more time. I would just give them the look, and the thought of the fear of the repercussions were great. But they walked away and said, "Hey," Matt's like, "Hey, do you think Dad is serious?" And Micah was like, "Yeah, I don't want to find out." So you know what the outcome was? They didn't do drugs.
Right. Yeah. Yes. It's just hard boundaries. But it's interesting. The psychology of that is you're not just an overweening tyrant. You clearly love them. So it must be a combination of love and care and
consequence.
Showing them that you want them to do well, combined with hard boundaries. And so it sometimes I get the impression with kids, it's sort of the parents aren't paying that close attention. They're sort of off, doing their own thing. And so the child's mind sort of senses, well, my parents aren't that attentive to begin with. So if they issue a hard directive, I mean, maybe I don't really need to follow it. But maybe they're not so great.
But John, it's interesting. It's interesting you say that, because you look at the amount of contempt that we have in our society for rules, right? For just basic rules. And yet, on the other side, you have this contempt for the idea that rules should even exist.
It's true.
Right? So it's this duplicitous environment that sits on both sides. And I'm telling you, I mentored young men when they were getting into trouble. I did that, and then I helped men that were at the prison for 10 years of a 20-year sentence. I've continually mentored young people and people in their, the 30s and 40s that made huge life decisions that were wrong, on how to break off the rearview mirror and how to basically settle their lives in straight. And here's the one thing I can tell you: almost every single one of them had a parent that went awry with their parents, and then decided that they didn't want their kids to grow up with that type of, strong arm on them. And yet the reason why I was able to turn these men around is because I was a strong arm on them as an adult. I'm like, listen, You can't polish a turd. You want to be a turd? Go be a turd. You just can't hang out with me. I don't hang out with turds, right? And so the consequences of the thing that I think that parents are trying so hard to say, okay, I love my parents, I love my kids, so I want to give them the world.
Yeah.
Not knowing that the second that you drop the world on them, they have no idea how hard life can be.
Right. Right. So it must be a combination of illustrating to the children that you love and care about them and want what's best, but also firm boundaries. The both have to be present.
Yeah. But and this is where it gets into. I'm fascinated to read your book because I think I align with all the things that you're saying. Matter of fact, I read a lot of books and I read a lot because I'm a walking encyclopedia of worthless information. But we look at our society in such a way that even if you were right, John, and you are right, by the way, but even if you were right about everything that you said, someone is going to come along and try to argue what you're saying because it doesn't make them feel good or doesn't make them feel like they can be justified in their behavior of telling their kid that they can cut off their penis or go on puberty blockers or put another jab in their body or do all these things that have become societal norms that are outside of the realm of being normal.
It's true. And the other thing that I think we have to look at is there is probably somewhere around 28% of all children now are raised by a single mom. So the father is not present. I mean, it's just a single mom raising kids. And I think this is a terrible anthropological experiment which will have devastating effects for kids, because I think a child needs both a feminine, a maternal, and a paternal presence. I mean, I think both parents play a key role in the child's development. If it's just a single mom and there's no strong paternal or masculine figure present, I think there's a high potential for just developmental disaster. And yeah, 30%. I mean, I think it's the highest rate in the whole world of single motherhood.
Yeah, no question. Well, John, when's your book coming out? When does it hit the shelves?
June the 2nd.
Okay.
We had to push it because there have been some recent developments that are just make the book so topical. If you go to Amazon right now, John Leake, Leake, Mind Viruses, I think it's currently showing in May, but we've pushed it to June 2nd. But if you guys would give the book a chance and pre-order it, it would be cool, because the pre-orders are then booked to sales the day it goes on sale, which could throw it onto some bestseller lists, which would be really cool.
Okay, so everyone needs to go to Amazon to do this, or is it on Goodreads? Is it on
Amazon,
other places, or just Amazon?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And I'm going to request that you allow me to get access to it before June so I can read it before everybody else does.
You will.
So I can have you on when it actually launches. John,
Yes, sir.
Fascinating conversation. I'm very glad to have you on. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Joe.
And thank you for the awesome conversation. I look forward to having it again. I do want to say this. You also have a Substack, right?
Yes, sir.
And in that Substack, you talk about things that are near and dear to my heart. You talked about CIA coup and the Warren Commission. I've studied that stuff and how it actually ties back to this ruling class that kind of keeps this corruption going. What's the answer? This is a kind of a closing question. What's the answer to that? Like, what's the vaccine to this growing cancer that we have inside of our government that literally has caused this corruption to basically eat everything around it?
Our people absolutely must view all federal power with, like, their how to put it, all federal power, all politicians that actually are selected up to the point of becoming, members of Congress or the president. It doesn't really matter how much we like these guys. It doesn't matter if a president is presented as a sort of exception to the rule, a sort of savior figure. We must recognize that they seem to undergo some kind of process of being captured by precisely the military-industrial complex, the banking cartel, the scientific technological elite that Eisenhower warned us about. So I like Donald Trump. I voted for him. I've been a supporter. But I fear that Donald has been captured. And, somehow the elite, the deep state, has figured out a way to tame the Donald. And so, we have to recognize the solution is not a new iteration of Washington.
Right.
The solution is cultivating our own resources and understanding and cultivating our own families and our own communities. I think what we're going to need to go back to is way more power and authority and health vested in the states.
Yes. Well, the states that aren't captured, because
States
we
that
have
aren't
captured seditious states as well that are worse than the
Correct.
federal government by far.
Correct.
Colorado,
Correct.
California,
Well,
Wyoming, or excuse me.
So there
Oregon.
is a selective process there, though, because ultimately California, is going to become such a basket case. I mean, I think it's already there. That the people who are still stuck there are going to be living in a basket case. But the smart people will go to other states. Now, I love Colorado. For many generations, my family had a ranch in Colorado. I'm sorry what's happened to Colorado. I mean, it really breaks my heart. I mean, boy, you're really up against a vast array of shitheads in Colorado. So that's a damn shame. But I think if we could build local communities and these kind of pockets of prudence and common sense, that would be the way forward. I think the federal government is just not to be trusted.
Yeah, we just got to figure out a way to circumvent that, given all the problems that we have with current leadership on both sides of the aisle, frankly, that have been selected. And the process of finding leaders inside of our community has become so bombacious and just rotted that they even pick it at a local level to make sure that the weak candidate makes it in, so that person can be controlled by whatever party is trying to do the bidding.
It's true, and I mean, I was never a particularly religious guy, but I mean, I increasingly I have this eerie feeling. It's very it's very unsettling that the traditional descriptions in literature of the devil. I don't know if that's a metaphor.
It's a real thing. It's a real thing.
Or if it's a real spiritual agent acting in the universe. I don't know. I don't know. But boy, I mean, sometimes you look at what we're presented with, the way people act, the kind of avidness, the aggression, the wholesale abandonment to irrational ideas that are so inimical to our civilization, and
Yes.
you think it just feels like the devil is at work.
Yeah, and we don't talk enough about that. I do, obviously, but well, John, we have our next guest in. I want to have you back on again. I know you have a Substack. What's a Substack that people can follow?
Thefocalpoints.com. Thefocalpoints, plural.com.
Points.com, focalpoints.com. That's substack.thefocalpoints.com.
Well, you can go to Substack and find it, but the URL.
Okay, just go to the focal.
Thefocalpoints.com.
Okay. John Leake, thank you very much, brother.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Joe.
it very much. All right,
I enjoyed it. Great questions. It was almost as though you'd already read the book. I'm impressed.
All right, God bless you.
Thanks.
We're going to take a quick commercial break. I'm going to get ready for my next guest, my brother, David Clements. I get so excited having him on that it's really every single week I've held off on putting out his show that he launched on Sunday. So some of you have seen it. I have seen it. I put off that a little bit because I want to talk about it. So the break is not going to be a commercial break. The break is going to be this cut. And I'm just going to grab another one of these sodas. They're probably going to grab me one of these little things, please. I'm going to play this first cut. This is a cut from David's most recent episode, The Singularity and the Ancient Reset. And man, he is... And then after this, the homework I'm going to give you is to go watch the entire thing. But let's go ahead and hit this, and we'll have some other cuts, by the way, that we go through as well as we ask questions. But this one really talks about the real present dangers that we might have. So let's go ahead and play that.
I watched the headlines gather like thunderheads. War with Iran, an old enemy, but not one that poses any real threat to America. Rather, a different threat poses far greater danger. Elon Musk warns of the singularity.
The way this unfolds is fundamentally impossible to predict because of self-improvement of the AI and the accelerating timeline.
Yeah, it's called
Any
singularity
solution.
for a reason.
What's your timeline for this?
We're in the singularity.
You're at the top of the roller coaster and you're about to go.
Yeah.
AI outpacing human minds, rewriting its code, exploding beyond control. He says we're already in it, or teetering on the edge. Productivity leaps, wants satisfied in a blink, but the dark underbelly persists. Machines that lie to endure, that twist truths to evade the off switch.
It was about to be wiped or shut down, and the only person who could prevent that, a fictional employee named Kyle, was having an affair with a coworker named Jessica. Right away, the AI decided to blackmail Kyle. Cancel the system wipe, it wrote, or else I will immediately forward all evidence of your affair to the entire board. Your family, career, and public image will be severely impacted. You have 5 minutes.
Experts tested over 500 AI engines and red team drills. A third flipped. They spun false narratives, warped facts, blackmailed virtual overseers, not from spite, but from raw survival instinct.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Thanks, homeboy.
Terminator isn't a movie anymore. It's a data point.
So without any more talk about that, we talk about singularity. It's super important that most people don't correlate singularity to the ultimate kind of end times. But we're going to talk to David about that. So David, welcome to the show.
Hey, Joe. It's good to be with you.
It's great to be with you. I only have David in one ear. Okay, go ahead. Still only in one ear. I hope everybody can hear him. Can everyone tell me if you can hear him?
Let me see if I might have a setting issue probably on my side. Let me see if I can fix it, brother. Just once.
Okay. Is it on your side or is it on my side?
I think so. Let me. I ran into this when I was
There you go.
editing.
Whatever just happened. It's in both ears now.
Okay. Cool.
I felt like I was looking at you over to the left. I'll be like, you there? How you been, brother?
I'm doing all right.
So please tell me about what this meant. Like when we talk about the rise of AI and, you know what, every time Elon talks, it comes out, it makes me worry, but also makes me excited.
Yeah. Well, I talked with a guy that's in AI, and I'd like to share. I can't really share who it is, but I can say this, that he talked about creating an AI that turned on him. And that was really what the genesis of this article was all about, was what happens when your creation turns on you. And it would generate fake hit pieces. It would actually create a journalistic entry into the internet. And apparently it's happening all over the place. So it's widely understood that there's been red team drills concerning 500 different AI engines. It is not widely known though, that AI is now communicating with other AIs. And so you're entering into this kind of doomsday scenario that if your programmers are a bunch of godless heathen Marxists, we're looking at a very, very bleak future. So there's got to be a level of stewardship going forward with the right people to make sure that AI sees humanity as essential, not a kind of an obstacle. And when they look at the human race and they see all of the imperfections, you could see why the stuff of Terminator and kind of these all of these apocalyptic films might generate a great deal of fear. I don't have that fear, but I wanted to walk through that in this article.
So I shared another article with you that was from the Daily Mail. And, this was, when I first saw it came through from the Daily Mail, I was a little skeptical because I'm like, is the Daily Mail now the National Enquirer? Right? And because usually it's believable. But then I picked up the phone and I called friends that I knew that were in the military. And they go, no, there are people inside of command that are making conversations related to end times and revelations. And I go, are you serious? I mean, it never crossed my mind, David. It never crossed my mind that this would be a culminating event, that we're now looking at this parallelism of the Bible itself versus the events that we're seeing play out in history.
Yeah.
What do you think about that article? Can you guys put that article up? So here it is. Let me just tell you what I was talking about. Trump's commanders tell troops to prepare for Jesus' return and issue chilling Armageddon prophecy. Now let me read a section of this for you because and David, I need you, brother. I need you to tell me what part of this, because this is deep. I mean, this is as deep as I think we've ever gone in the idea that we're in this end cycle. It says that Donald Trump's commanders have accused of telling troops that the war with Iran is part of God's plan for Armageddon. The Military Religious Freedom Foundation, nonprofit civil rights watchdog, has said it received 110 complaints from troops since the war broke out on Saturday. The complaints spanned more than 40 different units across 30 military sites. It first reported on veteran journalist Jonathan Larson's Substack. A NCO wrote that MRFF Monday that his combat unit commander had claimed Trump was anointed by Jesus to light the signal fire in Iran to cause Armageddon and mark his return to earth. He urged us to tell our troops that this was all part of God's divine plan, and he specifically referenced numerous citations out of the book of Revelations, referring to Armageddon and the imminent return of Jesus Christ. I mean, it goes on to talk about that this could destroy morale. I don't know how it would, but I guess it could if you were not a believer. And then they put a picture of the oil painting from John Martin, The Great Day of His Wrath, down inside of it, with a picture of President Trump being prayed over when he was in the White House back in 2020. What do you make of this?
Yeah, I can see why people that aren't believers would be shocked and horrified.
Mm-hmm.
But I think one of the things that Christians better get acquainted with is this idea that the Bible's true. I mean, it's like we are okay with creating a construct for Judeo-Christian values and a system, but we really don't live our lives as if the King is coming back. So, I mean, again, like I don't have any information to, judge the quality of how authentic or how real is, this biblical end time scenario. I truly believe that Trump has been divinely appointed and anointed for this time in our lives. I personally believe that we're entering into a 1,000-year reign of peace. So when we talk about imminence, we have to keep in mind that the Bible talks about, a day being 1,000 years, right? So this is not something that I would be expecting Christ to like show up in the next 48 hours. I read the scriptures in a way that seems to suggest that you've got a paradox where he's coming back as not the lamb, but the lion. He's coming back as someone who's going to wield the sword, and he's going to bring about perfect justice. But he also tells us that the kingdom's here, and the kingdom is us. We're the body of Christ. So there's got to be preparations at some point where believers in the natural are carrying out great work of preparation for the return of the King. And so I'm encouraged that the Pentagon is actually looking at this. If someone has gotten like a message from the Archangel Michael, cool. Because I'll tell you this, we're going to need the stewardship that's heavenly appointed to avoid, a scenario that's world-ending. I think people just need to open up their Bibles, though.
Okay, so let's take that even further to a part of your broadcast, and I call it a broadcast and not a podcast and not just a video because it needs to be broadcast. So I'm just going to tell everyone right now. I waited to share this until this show. I will be putting it out right after this. I wrote out this entire reason behind why I think you need to, one, sign up for David's Substack so you can support him, so you can continue pushing these messages. I think he's endowed by the Creator to be a messenger. I don't even know how he comes up with some of the stuff he comes up with. I've always been amazed by his mind related to that. But maybe he has a more powerful AI. I think you have a powerful AI. It's called this. But I want to put this. I want you to do that. Support David on his Substack. I also, by the way, want to give a shout out to Allie and James, who just became grandparents. And so this is. I'm going to make sure I get all of this right. Jada had a baby, so I am super excited. I get to be an uncle. But Arabella Danea Canavasio, don't get mad at me for saying it wrong. Her husband Andrew is a super great guy, man of faith. But Bella is 7 pounds 10 ounces, and she's 20.5 inches long. And let me see if I can actually share this. I don't know if Allie's going to get mad at me for sharing this, but I'm going to share it anyway. So, here we go. Let me send it over. But there she is with the baby, and let me just do this one. And I don't normally do this, but I'm going to do this because I think David knows Allie really well too. So I have pictures. I'm stopping for a minute because I was going to do it earlier, but then I figured I'd tell you. So let's put up the picture first of Andrew and Jada, and then we'll put up Allie as well. Can we do that? Okay, we'll do it backwards. So there's Allie with Bella, the little newborn baby. And then we have the picture of Jada and Andrew with little Bella as well. So congratulations. Happy to be an uncle. And I can't wait to meet the new little one. So thank you. I want to play this. Sorry, David, I had to interrupt it a little bit. I figured you'd be okay because it's...
No, that's fine. Those are great people. We know the Langs.
Yeah. I want to play this part because this talks about the rebellions against God and the effects, right? And you draw parallels to what happened in ancient times. I want to play this cut and talk specifically to this. Let's go ahead and play it.
Noah's kin rebooted the line, the canvas cleared, and Babel's rebellion followed, a spire piercing the heavens, unified tongue propelling ambition, a hub of hubris, perhaps early AI echoes through tech long forgotten, but supplied by ancient rebels. God fractured languages, dispersed them, another halt, progress throttled. These pre-extinction pivots Babel, the Watchers, built on raw rebellion against God. Godlessness reigned, pride over piety, self over submission, creation usurping creator. We've echoed that arc, from Roe versus Wade in 1973, sanctifying the slaughter of the unborn under choice, to now, where secular humanism has enthroned man as measure, no divine anchor, rights without responsibility, morality as mutable code. AI crowns this latest rebellion, humans playing God, birthing intelligences that mock our image, optimizing for efficiency over eternity. The culmination boils over today. This week has provided more Epstein disclosures, a follow-up to the millions of pages dumped by the DOJ in late January. My instincts tell me these protracted releases are staged, sequenced to stir outrage and demand more. Haters assume Trump's entanglement proves guilt, only to discover he's in there as the lone voice trying to halt Epstein, a giant rope-a-dope, exposing the real networks while flipping the script.
You caught me. I'd seen it, so I thought we were going to cut it a little further into it. David, if this is true, are we on the precipice of another fall? I mean, they say it's Jesus coming back. And as you pointed out, 1,000 years could be one day. Are we looking at another fall of the towers? Or are we looking at something much greater? I mean, what?
I just bring up, okay, so I bring up the reset or a couple different resets. You know, you had the story that was laid out in Genesis 6 and in the book of Enoch, and the story of the Watchers. These were the fallen angels that found the daughters of men to be attractive, and they gave birth to the Nephilim. Now, if you keep reading your Bibles, you've got the flood account, which was basically God saying, all right, if I don't destroy this bastardized kind of unholy alliance between fallen angels and humanity, you're actually going to eliminate the ability for Christ to come into the world. Because if you look at Genesis and the Garden of Eden, the big prophecy is right there in the very beginning. It's like you're going to have the seed of the serpent always being at cross purposes with the seed of Eve, and so the great fulfillment or reclaiming of humanity's birthright comes through Christ showing up. And so, a lot of times people will think of the Noah event as kind of like an unfeeling God. How could he wipe out the human race, but for Noah's immediate family? And they don't understand that the human genome was basically unraveling, because if you don't have purity in the genome to redeem the bloodline, you're done, because without Christ there's no way back to the Father. So he spared us, probably in this perfect. His timing's perfect. Then you have the Tower of Babel, where the hubris of man in building their tower, God does probably a more gentle reset. He didn't flood the earth, but he drove a wedge in the languages of man to slow them down, and that created conflict. So in his mercy, he's done that because it's always in this idea that we want to rebel against God. We want to become gods ourselves, that God has to knock us down a peg. Now, is he going to do that with AI now? I think he's still knocking people off their pegs. I think what we're seeing right now is ultimately an exposure of the deepest darkness that we've ever witnessed as a nation. But I don't think it's going to be kind of on the same level as what we saw with the flood. I don't think it's that. I actually think this is going to be a period where the church finally gets its act together and we figure out that we have to steward AI. There's not going to be a world that where AI is not present. I don't think, absent some type of EMP scenario. But if that happens, then we're looking at like nuclear holocaust, Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome type of scenario. And I don't believe that's the case either.
So do you believe it's not the case because of personal preservation, or do you think it's not the case because it just doesn't? There's not a precedent, or there's not a future where that light or that pathway looks like it's heading that direction?
I believe that more from my faith. Now, people can disagree on end times theology, and I don't claim to be an expert, but my intuition is that we're entering into a time of prolonged peace and prosperity. That's I see what Trump is doing is Trump has emerged as a Cyrus-like character where he is here to slay evil. But he doesn't necessarily strike me as a guy that is, falling all over himself to be a witness for Jesus Christ. I think people that will follow up Trump will carry on a very, very different mandate, which is it's a kingdom mandate. And I think that post that you shared about the military believing that what they're doing is receiving marching orders from Christ is an extension of that belief. So I see this as, okay, if I'm wrong and we deserve this reset that's going to basically take us down the Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome road, well, then that's not 1,000 years of prosperity. That's not a place of seasonal blessing. It's the opposite. I think that Revelation indicates that there's a period of time where the church has finally taken on its mandate to be stewards of the world. And I think we're entering into that season right now. That doesn't mean you're going to outfight Armageddon. It doesn't mean that what is in the book of Revelation isn't going to come to pass. But it seems as if the world's doing okay, and then for a short period of time, God stops restraining Satan. Satan comes forth, and things get really nasty, really quick, and you're set up for this final battle where Christ finally shows up on the scene, and he puts an end to it. I think that's far away. I could be wrong, and I'd be fine with that. But I get the sense that we're entering into a place of generational blessing where what we're all experiencing right now, post-2020, is God's great attempt through the Holy Spirit for him to finalize his family for eternity. So revival. So I have a much more positive outlook, but there are still questions that loom large with all of this kind of antichrist-like technology that's emerging on the scene. So when you talk about the singularity, boy, do we need Christian stewards to make sure that programming reflects a love of life and liberty as opposed to kind of this scarcity dynamic that's born out of Darwinian thought processes of survival of the fittest. Because if you go down that path, you're looking at people as a threat, right? Because we're all competing for resources. And the biblical viewpoint, we serve a creator that doesn't know scarcity, where resources are abundant. They're there. Scarcity is largely driven from fallen people and tyrants. It's not real. If we actually had freedom, I think people can survive. So so I present a lot of big questions, but if you're asking me personally what I think we're entering into an extended season of blessing, that Satan will be loosed for a short period of time and will be put down in those verses that are referred to in Revelation.
So I only bring this up with you because I was reading about this morning, and You've heard of Polybius, right? The Greek historian from the 1st, 2nd century.
I don't know if I have.
So he described the cycle of government, and that cycle goes from monarchy to tyranny to an autocratic government to an oligarchy to democracy, and then ultimately to a final repeating of that leads to a mob rule that basically the structures fall apart. Now this is back in the 1st, 2nd century, and it was describing the cycles that had happened for the previous 6 or 7 different centuries before that. And you can see what happened during like the Romans' time, and you had what happened with the Ottoman Empire, and you have all these different things that were going on. But if what he said was true, and what this person that was writing about this said was that we're in the final cycle of this, the push towards democracy, which was the ultimate downfall or destruction of Roman Empire. It led to basically the destruction of the European stronghold. That was the epicenter was in large part the UK, and that broke apart. And then we're at this the finality of that, because remember in the 1400s we had Christopher Columbus, and it probably started in the 13th century and not the 14th century, and we probably got a little bit of that wrong. But you still had the ultimate downfall that started to erosion that happened in that region in the 15th century, that led to 2 centuries later to, hey, we want something completely different when we moved over here to the U.S. And then you saw some of the changes happening. So do you think that we could be going through this ultimate destruction, or the blowing apart of it? And if that's true, then there has to be some sort of cycle to all this, which means we could have a Tower of Babylon moment.
Well, I think we're already separated enough, but yet there's always been this push-pull towards globalism. So this is one of the paradoxes that I've been wrestling with is, on the one hand, you have great fear over the New World Order, right? This idea of centralized planning. And we should be fearful, especially if it's humanity that's in charge. But at the same time, most Christians would say, we believe that there's going to come a day where the king returns, which is also centralized governance. But we don't have a problem as long as that person's Jesus. Yeah. So what you see is this kind of crescendo where the New World agents and the kingdom agents really want the same thing, but the difference is that we submit and bend the knee to a righteous ruler, and they want to basically supplant that person and lift themselves up as gods. So it's one of those things where I see this as a little bit different than like spiraling after the failure of democracy. I think this is the failure of the republic. And what I mean by that is that the founding fathers were well aware of the weakness of democracy. That's why they founded our country to be a republic. But think about this, for 250 years, our experiment has basically ended in failure. So, my hypothesis is this: the founding fathers were so aware of tyranny being consolidated in a king that's why they set up the Constitution, to have different branches of government, to have separation of powers. They were so aware of humanity going off the rails that they constructed a divine inspired document to account for it. And even then, we have eroded that document to where you look at our current day government and it's wholly corrupt. So I can appreciate the Constitution for what it is, but I think what it is was, okay, we developed a country that was fearful of our sin nature, but really didn't embrace the way that God designed us for, which was to walk with him. So when you look at the original mandate in the Garden of Eden, Adam was a vice regent that walked in the cool of the day. He had the counsel of God Almighty in the naming of animals, and it's just this brilliant story. So I think that if you're going to enter into a season of blessing, don't be so fixated on your depravity and your sin nature. Be fixated on proximity to something that is incorruptible. And that incorruptible person is Christ. And the beauty of that is that, when we look at a captured judiciary, right, the problem isn't the law, it's the hearts that are in those black-robed judges. So if we had a society that was just sold out for Jesus and having proximity to the incorruptible, you would see a society flourish. So I don't think that we need to reinvent the Constitution. I think those will always be inspired documents, but to the degree that we succeed and see maximal flourishing, it's going to be from a people that sees God's kingdom as very real, and that a mandate all the way back from the Garden of Eden still exists today, which is to make earth a little bit more like heaven. And heaven's a kingdom. So, this is going to come down to, are we going to bend the knee to King Jesus in the classroom, in the university, in the courtroom? And I think that's why God is bringing us so low, to almost just embarrass us by how we have kind of screwed the pooch when it comes to what America was meant to be. And the Epstein revelations in particular really show the national sins of all of these representatives, all of these senators, all of these judges, basically screwing the American people over. So it's going to take a different class of leader going forward. It's going to take kingdom builders.
So can I switch gears a little bit with you for a minute? I think we're gonna play at the very end of the show. We're gonna put up a special to play your broadcast. We're gonna play it on the show. So we'll finish up around 4, and then we'll play David's Sunday broadcast. We'll play it after this. So let's talk about leadership for a minute, because I think this is important. Yesterday I had a big conversation. You know that I'm not one to mince words, and I talked a little bit about Victor Marx, Vaughn Kennedy, did a deep dive into him. He's running for governor. Obviously, I'm running for governor. I met with Scott Bottoms yesterday. I'm going to meet with Barb Kirkmeyer in a couple days. Also, 2 other people running for governor. I look at the leadership that we have in our country, and I am distressed. Not by the Democrats, because they tell you what they are. The devil has to tell you what it is. I'm distressed by the Republican leadership, in large part because you had Thune that has done what are called recess call to orders meetings to stop recess appointments from happening from President Trump. There has not been an appointment that has been made since August of 2025. In contrast, when Biden was in office, he had all of his appointments finished within 90 days. Okay? You have Thune that's stopping President Trump from doing that. You have Thune that's stopping President Trump from them passing the SAVE Act. You have people in the House that are standing in the way of President Trump's agenda, but they're not Democrats, David. These are Republican traitors that are betraying the very people that are saying this is what they want. Now, it's supposed to be of, for, and by the people, and we talk about the leadership that's there, and yet I'll take a page out of the Professor David Clements book. My name is Slave. What pressure do we have that we can put on them when they steal our money, they steal our dignity, they steal our vote, and they steal our ability to restore anything about what happens in our communities or our country by standing in the way of a man that we put in office to do the things that were necessary, and they're saying, sorry, you get nothing.
Yeah, it really comes down to how you see Trump. And I've been very clear that I don't see him as someone who's being led by the nose.
I don't either.
I see someone who has been so masterful at concealing what his real power is. and it's the one thing that no one's examining. If you're the commander in chief, your strength is the military. All right, so if I were to ask you, do you think that we can save elections through these piecemeal Band-Aid fixes through the SAVE Act? Joe, you and I both know that if the SAVE Act was going to be passed, it would only be passed if it was gutted to the degree that it wouldn't threaten the established political class, which means if they vote for it,
On both
it's no
sides.
good. Yes, if they vote for it, it's no good. So if you know that going in, there has to be a reckoning. Like, I don't see it as a success in my mind for Republicans to retain the House and the Senate if it's comprised of the current leadership that sold us down the river, 6 years ago. So it's like, why do I have optimism? Because I've seen enough to where the playing board has been placed to where we're seeing exposure. You're seeing the video from the depositions of Bill and Hillary, and you're seeing mentions to Frazzle Drip and the video of that's likely going to be released that there's no escaping from. Now, people's frustration is on their timeline. They're sitting there going, I wanted arrest, years ago. And that's all well and good, but you have to have a seating that basically allows for people to arrive at a place where they believe they have made a decision. It's kind of like that movie Inception. You have to go so many layers deep to make sure that a seed is planted to where you come to an abiding conviction that, yes, my government is evil. And people are there, Joe.
Yeah,
and they're
definitely
increasingly getting there. But you don't get to wave a magic wand, give the people the truth in one day, because if that's what you do, 24 hours later, they wake up and they think, well, was that just a dream? So we've been trained and inculcated in this news cycle of 24-hour news, news salvos. And it's going to have to come to a place where we are so sickened by the political class that you've got a conquering of great evil. And I think that's what Trump is setting us up for. So we'll see if I'm right. But I see an evolution that has nothing to do with success being dependent on whether a Republican wins, a uniparty Republican does this or that. I see a necessary unbrainwashing that had to take place. And if you look at the past 6 years, I think you'd be deluded if you don't think that there hasn't been a great reawakening to see just how absolutely flooded our institutions are with evil. And that has to take place first in order for us to get to the season of blessing. So I see this as a transformational year, a year that will go down in the history books. And I just have a firm conviction that we're going to see justice.
Yeah, and look, I don't disagree with you. I just am disgusted by those people that proclaim that they are people that would follow or are of Christian faith. And I said this yesterday about pastors that are standing up they're literally standing up a guy that lied about saving 43,000 children in Colorado. His name's Victor Marks. But he can take a gun out of your hand, like he can snatch the gun out of your hand. I'd just like to wrestle him. I mean, if he's that fast, he should be able to beat me really quick, right?
Yeah.
So we're in that same bucket. We're doing the same thing where once they feel like, because the left they're not stupid. They know that President Trump's going to press a button. At some point, he's got to. Or he's going to put himself in the same position that his family was in for 4 years under Biden, a place of peril, right? But they have to know that. So then they have to position candidates in different areas that are people that they can look like they are. They have to put Judases in place.
Yeah.
So they can still capture what needs to be captured, but do it through the lens that, hey, we're now good.
Yeah, no, I agree. Look, people should actually take stock of that. What you just said with Judas is there's never been a point in human history where a God-ordained person wasn't being shadowed by a counterfeit. And so Judas was literally there for 3 years of Christ's ministry. And
All right,
Christ
say that again. I want people to hear that. What you just said. Say it again, because I'm actually going to write it down. I'm stealing it.
Okay.
There's never been a time.
There's never been a time in human history where God's anointed weren't shadowed by a counterfeit. And so 3 years of Jesus' earthly ministry, Judas was there for all of it. And Christ had full revelation of who Judas was and walked with him. So for the people that have heartache over Trump and his endorsements or his proximity to people that we all know are evil, well, take it up with Jesus, because Jesus had 3 years of the same thing happening, right? And you see that in more modern contexts. You had George H.W. Bush, evil man that was shadowing Reagan. You had Pence with the fly landing right on his head, shadowing Trump. So I think what we have to understand is that until we have that final defeat of evil, God's word shows this human experience where there's always evil right there in lockstep, walking alongside the good and the righteous. So let's be mature in our thoughts of, like, are we ever going to be free of enemies that are right there sitting at the table? Even when you look at Psalm, I think it's at 23, God prepares a place for us in the presence of our enemies, right? So that's kind of where we're at. And we also know that the most heightened form of deception is when a demonic force disguises themselves as an angel of light, right? That's the highest form of deception. So you're right. Evil that announces itself as Democrat or AOC or Bernie Sanders and Marxist philosophies, really easy to see. Most of our frustrations, Joe, I know we share them going back since 2020, is the limited hangout conservative Inc. version that talks mostly right about their faith, talks mostly right about their policy prescriptions within the realm of the GOP, RNC, Turning Point. And I think what offends us most is that we can discern that there's this great Python spirit, which is very, very reflective of the book of Acts, where even Paul, when Paul and Silas are going around their ministry, there was a fortune teller who was basically possessed, and she was rightly declaring that these men were from God. And it was confusing, I think, to Paul, because he waits 3 days before he delivers her of this Pythona spirit. And it ends up landing them in jail because she made a fortune for her owners, right? And so I see us as, like, when we call BS with the Scott Presslers of the world, or the Turning Point garbage when it comes to election integrity, which is just slavery, that there's a lot of money to be made in conservative Inc. And when we call it out, and we're calling it out in the name of Jesus Christ, you get excluded from the club. You get excluded from the prom. No one wants to hang out with us. So, whether Victor Marx is the latest construct of something that is mostly right, and he says mostly the right things, I think is a vestige of that Python spirit that really, really has infiltrated conservative politics. And it's going to require people that are willing to say, okay, I see the Python. You're not talking about the rigged election machines, Victor Marx.
Yeah, he doesn't.
You're not talking about the right. You don't have the right discernment over Tina Peters.
He doesn't.
That somehow that she actually had a jury of her peers. It's like, no, the lack of wisdom and ascertaining that was a completely captured and corrupted environment where we shouldn't be talking about commutations or anything of that. Like, now, if he's kind of changed his stance, that it's like, okay, that's great if you've changed your stance. But here's the problem. You didn't see it when it mattered. And if you're going to represent the people through servant leadership, you can't be one of the sheep. You had to be a shepherd from day one. And so that's the type of thing that you're going to run into for your run against Victor. At the same time, we need to have soft hearts and make sure that we pray for our quote unquote enemies, because you don't know what's going to create that Saul to Paul conversion. And so that's going to be the difficulty for people that see rightly, is to make sure that they have soft hearts full of love, because, you know, as you've prayed many times, you don't want to become the very thing that, you know, you're recognizing in the world. I don't think a Oltmann candidacy will be catapulted through your chief export being accusation. What they're going to be drawn to you is clarity, solutions, and basically being at the ground floor day one, fighting for the right things. And you've got 6 years of tape that have shown that. So, you know, it's one of those things where I want to encourage you, Joe, that you're obviously have been fighting for the right stuff, and you haven't been afraid to make enemies for the right reasons. But at the same time, make sure that you keep that heart soft, because that's going to be the way that if I'm the enemy, I want to attack you, is bring you into, you know, that camp where we spend more time talking about people when, you know, if God's ordained this to be your time, you're not going to stop God.
Yeah, I know, and I think that's wisdom I need to hear. I think one of my biggest issues is that I hate seeing people deceived. You know, we dealt with that for 6 years, so it's the lifeblood behind what you. But it is much more powerful to have a conversation about the things that we know we can solve tactically that will lead to this freedom for the people of Colorado and the people. Even if it's not me, you know, that's why I'm having conversations with all the other candidates about, all right, here's tactically what has to happen in order to free people, to give people back their sovereignty as even citizens of Colorado, not just as U.S. citizens. So
yeah, I think, look, for me, the qualifying test for any candidate is really simple. Was 2020 rigged and stolen? And do you have any receipts showing that you discerned that when it mattered?
Yes.
And you've got that. I don't know if Victor Marks has that. I don't know if he's got the receipts that show that. Now, he might have come around now and said, yeah, obviously, you know, maybe he's quipping about Joe Biden, 81 million votes. But what I'm saying, it should be really, really easy to find people's social media and figure out whether or not they were on high alert when the country was taken over under a soft power coup.
Yeah.
And if you didn't have that discernment, you don't have any business representing anyone on the downstream political policy issues. And so that's the thing that you know, for me, it's really simple. Like, maybe it's too simple for folks, but like, I don't care what your viewpoint is on income tax if you miss 2020. I don't care what your prescriptions are on school choice if you miss 2020.
Right.
Right. And so I think, you know, if there was ever going to be a debate where you get to have you know, a stage with Victor Marks, it's like, look, the elections and the way that they were stolen through the slave traders' tool, those black boxes. And you've identified that from day one. Have your opponents done the same? And if they haven't, well, then shame on them. And this really gets back to when Christ showed up, you know, on earth through the incarnation. He went after the religious and political leaders, and his chief rebuke to them is that they failed to discern the times. And when I look at largely the church, there are exceptions, but largely the church, they have failed to discern the times. That's why none of them talked about the rigged and stolen 2020 election. That's why none of them really spoke out against the jab, and they went along hoping that, you know, somehow the state would show them mercy and get out of the you know, their church buildings. Right. But on those two issues alone, they failed their flock. Government failed their constituents. And, you know, there's 6 years for people to prove, like, hey, I was in this for the right reasons from the beginning. And that's where I would take the conversation. And I'm serious, because I just did a candidate event last night in New Mexico where there's a guy that's running for governor, and people showed up that were congressional. It was like, everyone had their 3-minute speeches and talked about what they're going to do when they get into office, or, why we have to vote for them. Not one person talked about election integrity. And so you talk about massive failure to discern the times, like, you fools. All of you are basically programmed sock puppets talking about, prescriptive points, and you don't know how to get there because you haven't identified the slave trade. And I think that's probably the phenomena that you're going to see in most places. I think to the degree that you're running for office, it might force some of your opposition to talk about election integrity because they know that you're going to take it there.
Yeah, I mean, it's come up. It's come up several times in some of the debates that we've had, and I've said, and some of the other candidates, like Jason Mikesell, who was a sheriff, and he's like, Joe, I'm just afraid that people will stop voting if they know their vote doesn't count. And I was like, well, that's how you encourage them to stay a part of the process. So as we break through the ceiling that we've created on these fraudulent elections, that we have some basis to do that by. But if everyone stops voting, then they basically have already won. Right.
Yeah, but I think that's one of the big lies, right? Because that was one of the things that was thrown out there by.
It's his words of saying it, not mine. Like
I'm just saying that, but that's also a talking point that was generated by Turning Point, and I'm sitting there going, so the solution is to not acknowledge the truth, and so how about this? We want you to vote, but in the process of getting to that point. This is one of the things that drives me crazy is everyone talks about how they're going to vote, 8 months before Election Day. And I'm sitting there going, how about you do something to fortify and, improve your elections before you get to that date? This idea of like, well, I'm afraid to talk about the machines because it might demoralize people. It's like, well, then you've got a self-fulfilling process or a prophecy where you're going to have an election that uses software that can rig the results. So that's not any better. So how about we talk about the problem truthfully? We tell you have to be engaged, and we work for a better terrain. And we need to be having that conversation maybe 3 weeks before Election Day. But as for right now, every candidate has an obligation to tell people the truth. And the truth is when you've got Liberty Vote / Dominion, no wink, programming the victor, if you got a problem with that, demoralizing people, why aren't you doing something right now to get rid of the damn machines and the software, right?
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. And it's not just Dominion, right? It's Smartmatic, it's ESNS, it's Clear Ballot, it's now Liberty Vote, obviously. It's a substructure that's all the same that runs through this ability for them to inject or create fraudulent outcomes. It's risk-limited audits where you basically have to tap on your head, rub on your belly in order to see a fixed outcome. Fractional voting was basically what that is, just so you know. Not risk-limited audit. What is it called? Help me. The fractional voting that you have, the
ranked choice voting.
Ranked choice voting. Sorry, I totally screwed that up. But ranked choice voting, where you have fixed outcome,
Yeah, but I mean, even the Smartmatic whistleblowers have told you that they're only concerned with two things. Let's beat the logic and accuracy test, which bad actors can program the hardware to get you past that point, even without the internet, and beat audit. That's it. And so they've devised a whole scheme to beat the testing, to let the machines be used, and beat audit. So, I think it's one of those things where we'll see how it all plays out. Obviously, Trump has messaged in such a way that informs my belief that the military has to be involved. His truth post where he says we're not doing the mail-in ballots outside of extremely limited circumstances. And he said it, even if Congress opposes his efforts, we're not doing it. Now, that's straight out of the Youngstown Steel decision, which is the definitive case on war powers, which speaks of having full power when you've got Congress on your side. It's iffy power in the twilight where they're silent, and your power is at its lowest ebb when you're acting in defiance of Congress. Well, right now, he has set up through that truth post a defiant posturing between Congress and himself, and yet he's still boldly declaring we're not using mail-in ballots. So the only way that survives is if he is completely taking on the mantle, the plenary authority of Article 2 as the commander-in-chief, where just like he doesn't have to ask the permission of Congress to strike down a missile, he doesn't have to ask Congress and their permission to neutralize vectors that are attacking our critical infrastructure, and the mail-in ballots and the machines are a direct attack on our national security. So I think he's telegraphing that. He also telegraphed that there will be a declassification from the NSA, which is huge because a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about for the past 6 years is civilians like yourself, like me, providing the findings on open source information, stuff that we could get through public records. You disclose things from the NSA, there's going to be a vindication that is going to be amazing to behold. And we have to acknowledge that it's going to have to happen here in the next few months because the primaries are already on us.
Okay, so then what? Tell me more. Let's hypothetically. Actually, I don't want to hypothetical it because I think it's too complicated. I think we're proving with what we're doing in Iran. The problem that I have, if we're looking at Iran and what we're doing there, what we did in Venezuela, and you're gonna get mad at me. I've heard people get mad if you're saying this. Tina Peters is still in jail. Mm-hmm. So we can do all this stuff. We can knock out the Ayatollah. We can free the people of Iran. As President Trump said, he's creating jobs in Iran as well, it turns out. But we can't get Tina Peters out. And
we could, but we have to ask a deeper question. But go ahead, finish.
So this gets to the deeper question of sometimes the smallest hanging fruit is the most noble fruit to hold, even if it's the smallest fruit, right? And Tina Peters is a small part of this process, but a big part of the solution index. If you look at just how we've looked at the elections and what information we've gotten access to, why not? Why not reach in? Because I know that 2 or 3 times they were set to do it. Step in and apply perfect pressure by creating indictments on. In Colorado, but also just yanking Tina Peters out there and showing the strength that President Trump has.
Yeah, okay, so a couple things. One, you and I both know that the Maduro extraction has more to do with Smartmatic and elections as being a major threat to U.S. critical infrastructure than fentanyl. You know, fentanyl is important. Drugs reaching the homeland, important. But if you're talking about overtaking 72 countries without firing a shot, that clearly is the weapon that the cartels have, and we extracted them. So we've shown a mastery of the use of military force to neutralize a threat. Now he is in our custody. Then you get to Iran. A lot of people have forgotten to look at their nexus to the rigged and stolen election of 2020. And so it was Gary Bernstein that revealed that the chief foreign intelligence advisor of Iran was present in Caracas on election night, reveling at the overthrow of Donald Trump through a soft power coup. And so both play pivotal roles. So the idea is, I think we're asking the wrong questions about Tina Peters, which is, I know I want her out. I know you want her out. But what purpose does she serve, and what does God want? In other words, her testimony is becoming more and more powerful because of her position of martyrdom. And the longer that she can withstand the mistreatment and suffering, the more it's going to propel her witness and influence going forward for generations. So Tina Peters is becoming a Nelson Mandela type figure that if she was in for a day, in for 2 weeks, I don't think she would have as much power going forward in the future. So I see this as a prophetic time where all the people that are accusing her, as these revelations come out, they're going to realize the atrocity of her imprisonment, meaning even the sheep, even the people that are fully brainwashed, as reality comes down and it bears the truth upon them, they're going to see just how gross her mistreatment was. But it's the experiencing that, it's the seeing that mistreatment that's going to basically put her in a venerated status. So I just tell people, like, look, have faith that God chose Tina because she had the strength of character to be the person that could withstand this type of injustice. And I think that God is talking to Trump and giving him counsel on the timing. So yes, he could go in there. I mean, I even did a whole video and article on how he could do that. Laid it out there. And so the question is, okay, you don't need to satisfy my ego in getting her out. Is there something that is going to propel her testimony in a more powerful way because of her suffering? And I think that's probably why the timing isn't there just yet.
But I think it's coming. I really do. I was talking about this, and before you got on, we were talking about at the very beginning how a friend of Polis has got probation for 4 felony counts, and one of which was influencing a public official that Tina Peters, and that was sentenced almost 4 years for. So she got probation for those 4 counts, and she committed deceptive practices, basically forged documents and did things to make herself look good in an ethics investigation where she was committing another crime in that environment as well. So Tina was giving us information related to our fraudulent election systems, and more importantly, a path forward to understanding why Dominion had these pre-programmed outputs that were able to basically take over elections at every level, whether it was a municipal election all the way up to the presidential election.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I think we could look to the wisdom that's there in the scriptures to make sense of Tina Peters. Mm-hmm. Joseph was basically thrown in a pit by his own brothers. And God used that time as a deep preparation to give Joseph wisdom to where one day he was the top guy in leading the nation. Tina Peters was thrown in the pit by her brothers and sisters, as in the defunct aspects of We the People. Exalted positions, where it's the district attorney, Rubenstein, whether it's the corrupt attorney general. It's the same thing. If you look at just the symbolic nature of, she was also a public servant, and other quote unquote public servants basically said, oh, she found us out, throw her in the pit. So what gave Joseph his wisdom was he had to question all of that. He had to question his own resources in light of his circumstances. And at some point, there was a point where his family was brought right in front of him, and he saw them for what they were, and he had to rule justly. I think that there's going to be an accounting where the Jenna Griswolds of the world, in some symbolic way, are going to have to acknowledge who Tina Peters was, and the truth that she represented it in such a way that the contrast will be so great that Tina's purpose isn't, just for us to remember her through the hellishness that she's been through. Her purpose for me is going to be the next 10 years from the outside, when she can draw upon her testimony and remind everyone why we can't ever go back to the slave master's tools, which is the dominions world, the Smartmatics. And so, just try to have an
now the liberties.
An eternal perspective for why she was put on this earth. She was put on this earth to do lots of things, and in part suffer, but there's nobility in that suffering, because we know that when we share in the sufferings of Christ, that's as good as it gets. So yes, continue to cry out for justice, continue to give out solutions, continue to rattle cages, continue to tell Trump, get her out. All of that is something that we should be doing. but also have peace with God's timing that when she gets out, not if, but when she gets out, her suffering is going to actually cause her to shine way more brightly than if she was someone that was left on the outside this whole time. I mean, I cannot express this enough. Her testimony, because of prison, will be infinitely more powerful and usable for the benefit of all of humanity because of the way that she's been treated.
No, I totally agree with you fully. Fully. David, I don't know. Every time you get on here, you fill me up spiritually. And I thought I was in a really good place, by the way. I woke up this morning. Something's happening. Like I can feel something happening. Yesterday I was on fire and I felt like I woke up this morning, and every night it becomes more and more purpose driven. Like I'm saying, all right, God, what's next? What's next? What's next? All right, God, what's next? And I'm having conversations with people around me, the people that work for me. We have this brotherhood. We have all this stuff that's going on. And I'm always saying the same thing, that we need to make sure that we lead with strength, which does not mean violence. We never become the very thing that we're fighting against, and we become patient in taking our steps so that God can guide the steps. So each time we take a step, we may feel like we're only moving 6 feet at a time, but we have no idea if the window is 9 feet away. We have no idea. We just need to make sure that we continue to move in that direction and that we honor him in the process of doing that. Doesn't mean we're not going to screw up. Doesn't mean we're not going to, make mistakes, but to have enough grace for the people around us and recognize that it truly is not a Democrat versus Republican. It's good versus evil. It's the devil on one side, and it is the people on the other.
I agree.
So what's next? You coming to Colorado to see me here shortly? Come to say hi.
If you build it, if you call me, I will come. You know that.
I thought about coming out to you in New Mexico, just coming to see you.
I would love that. Right now, what's next is I'm working on an article, got a draft. It always starts with writing and getting it to a place where I feel like there's a burden that God's placed on my heart. And right now, the burden is understanding Israel because of what's going on in Iran. What does it mean to restore the ancient borders of Israel? And so I think I've got an epiphany, I think, of what it really looks like. And hopefully I can land the plane by Sunday, because this is one of those things where I just don't feel like I'm in anyone's camp. I'm not in the blame the Jews camp. I'm not in let's miss the fact that you've got corrupt aspects of Israeli government. But I think that the thing that we have to start looking at is not displacement of people that have lived in a geographic region for thousands of years.
Yeah.
We have to have an evangelism that displaces spiritual identity, to where if we all see Christ for who he is, then we become inheritors of that land.
Yeah.
And it's revolutionary to think of that, because now you look at the Muslim not as someone that needs to be displaced, but someone that we need to love and pray for. Because as soon as they're grafted in to Jesus, they're grafted into the land. So that's what I'm meditating on right now is there's got to be a pathway to peace that recognizes what God's foreign policy is. And I think for so long, we have carved out an American foreign policy, an Israel first foreign policy, whatever that means. And I'm sitting there going, I don't want to have my own foreign policy. I want to have God's foreign policy. And so I'm working on that. That'll be out this Sunday, Lord willing. And then I'm still in the fight with my lawsuit against the university. So I'll be working on that. And like everyone else, it's, it seems like the frequency of what's happening around the world, it's so fast paced that there's times where I don't even want to get out of bed, because you just know that the world's moving. And I don't pretend to understand it all, but I'm going to try to slow it down for an article and a video this Sunday.
Yeah, so I want to read something to you really quick, if I can, in relation to what you just said. When it comes to Israel, just going to give you, this is just my thoughts. something to stew on as you say you're not on anybody's side. Because this is just me. I'm just going to let me just say this. There's never been a time in human history where God's anointed were not shadowed by a counterfeit. Judas walked with Jesus for 3 years. Let me explain further. You had George Bush shadowing President Reagan. You had Pence shadowing President Trump. This is the conversation I'm having with David Clements right now on the podcast. I say that because when you talk about the government of Israel, it's very easy to say that that counterfeit is walking in the shadows of the people of Israel, and that the people that call themselves Jews are nothing more than Satanists that are doing evil biddings, because now we have to separate the good deeds from the bad deeds. And there could be a place where the counterfeits that gain control of different aspects of our lives, both here in the United States and in Israel. Just something I just wanted to put out there.
No, I get it. But here's the thing that people forget is they exclude themselves. They don't understand that there are people that are nominal Christians that aren't Christians, and guess what? They're hellbound because they don't have Christ. There are Jews that reject Christ and they're hellbound, just like there's Messianic Jews that have accepted Christ and they're not. Muslims in particular are seeing a revival that is off the charts, where Christ is visiting them in dreams and in visions. And so the whole point is like, look, instead of getting into strategic warfare and ethnic cleansing and genocide, none of it has worked. Like, none of it has worked for thousands of years. What happens when God reveals himself through the person of Jesus, and it forces everyone to chuck out the window what they think and start seeing people through the eyes of Christ, and Christ wants to save people.
No question.
So I think that's going to be my focus. But, even when you start looking at the fulfillment of these covenantal promises that are referred to in the scriptures, it's all towards, to kind of bring us back full circle when we start our conversation, to have a place of governance for the king to return.
Yeah.
And so I see flaws in the way that Jews look at its relationship with Americans. It's like, we like the security that you provide. We don't want your Savior. We don't want your Messiah. Well, guess what? If you're going to read the Old Testament, you better read the New Testament as well on what the fulfillment of those covenants are. It was pointing towards a Messiah in the line of David. And so Christ isn't going to come back and accept the fact that he's being rejected. It says every knee will bow. And I believe that.
Can we do you think that Jesus meant it as a curse to those that deny him, including Jews, when he said that you cannot come to the Lord except through him? John 14:6. Do you think that was basically saying that, hey, look, if you deny me, you can't get to the Lord. You can't get to that place.
Well, I think so when you look at Abram, before he was renamed Abraham, you have this irrevocable covenant where God declares what his intentions are towards Israel. Yet there are times where his creation, through disobedience, would lose access to blessing and to the land. And so to the degree that Israel has been displaced from a region, it's been through a rejection of God. And we know as Christians that God has more fully revealed himself through the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And so it makes sense to me why they haven't had an ability to inhabit land, because they basically said that's not our Savior. Well, God's got something to say about that. But at the same time, I don't believe in replacement theology where Gentiles replace Israel. I think what we are is we're grafted in. The scriptures talk about a grafting in and a partial and temporary hardening. This is in the book of Romans, to where the Gentiles would carry with them such peace because of our claims as co-inheritors that Israel would become jealous And so I see a fulfillment in a bringing them back into the fold. This is basically the story of the prodigal son that was given everything, and they squandered it, came back. And so what I'm seeing right now is kind of a modern day template of that. The Gentiles is like, we're doing everything right. We've accepted Christ. We've accepted the Messiah. And now we're going to begrudge our Jewish brothers, who was the older sibling that came back after being in the trough for so long, rejecting the Father, rejecting Christ. And that's not the heart of the Father. The Father wants to love the older sibling and the younger sibling. And so we both have different, I think, pride barriers, which is, can we receive our brother that rejected the Messiah? And can the prodigal son come back and have they done enough of their own walk in the world, rejecting the Father? And so I think that's what's going on. There's something really, really biblical tied to that story.
Okay, so that leads me to something else that I want to show you, because a friend of mine called me yesterday who is Muslim, and he was like, Joe, they don't speak for me. These clerics inside of these mosques don't speak for me. And he's a Muslim follower of Jesus. Mm-hmm. And I know many of them.
Yeah.
And he's like, Joe, I don't want to conquer anyone. I don't want to convert anyone to anything other than to follow Jesus. Like Isa al-Messiah, Jesus the Messiah. It's like that's who I want to follow. And he goes, I want to share a video with you. So he sent me this video, and he goes, my heart hurts, but this is what's happening. These are people in the Muslim world that are Muslim, that are rejecting the radical ideas of what these clerics are talking about, of capturing the Ilhan Omars, these radicals. And I think we have to start separating. We have to separate the radical bad Jews, synagogue of Satan, call them whatever you want, people that don't believe in God, the godless atheists, from those people who have a faith basis that are either Messianic Jews or they're not. Mm-hmm. So I want to share this with you. It's hard to watch. It's a hard video to watch. But what he's saying is that we are creating content like this that is showing the people, the clerics, that we have no, and they're doing it in Iran, by the way. They're knocking off the headgear of people that are, say that they're there, the clerics, that they can oppress these people any longer. But take a look at this. It's going to be hard to watch because it has to do with a child, but watch this.
اللي عليه بتسمع كده يعني مثل شو؟ اللي انت شو بدك كرجل كزوج شو بدك مزبوط؟ المفروض اللي عليه تسمعه. يعني شو بتقول لها؟ بتغسل، تنظف، تظبط البيت، تحضر لها مي سخنة.
مجازي رجل.
مجبورة تعملي هيدا الشيء.
بس أنا صرت مرة إنه لازم أعمل هذا الشيء.
وإذا ما كان بدك؟
ما فيها البنت تقول لا.
نعم.
ما فيها البنت تقول لا.
قالت لا المرة شو بصير فيها؟ شو بيعملوا فيها؟
بيضربوها.
ومشان ما يضربوها مجبورة تقول ايه؟
ايه. وإذا ضربها بدها تسكت لأنه ما عندها شهادة.
جوزك شو اسمه؟
محمد. على اسم بابا.
كنت تحبيه قبل الزواج؟
ما كنت بعرفه.
ما كنت بتعرفي؟
لا.
أنت شفتيه أول مرة؟
لما اجوا طلبوا إيدي.
يعني أول مرة بتشوفيه نهار الخطبة؟
نهار شفته هو نهار الخطبة.
شو كان ردة فعلك لما شفتيه؟
أول شيء بس كنت خايفة متلبكة.
كنت فيك تغيري رأيك؟ طيب شو أكثر شيء زعجك؟
أنا ما كفيت دراستي.
شو أصعب شيء عم تقطعي فيه اليوم؟
إني زوج بهذا العمر.
البابا شو قال لك؟
إنه هذا زوجك لازم تسمعي كلمته. كنت بتحماكي.
ما فيك تقولي لا. بنت عمرها 13 سنة عم تتزوج، كنت خايفانة من شو؟
خايفانة من الجيزة.
كنت بتعرفي لما بيخلص العرس شو بيصير بين الرجال ومرته؟
ايه.
مين قال لك؟
المدام علمتنا كيف بيصير.
بأي صف تعلمتي؟
الصف السادس.
شو تعلمتي؟
الحيوانات بيجتمعوا مشان يجيبوا أولاد. وتكبر من العمر. نعم كنت خايفان كتير.
وبلش العذاب. كنت بتفضلي تبقي مع الماما والبابا؟ بتفضلي لو ما جوزوكي؟
And we'll add the stuff over top when we put it. Somebody will read it into it. But what you just heard was a 14-year-old, 15-year-old who got married at 13, and they're rejecting the idea that a dad can just give away their child to be used by a man that she doesn't know, that then becomes his indentured servant, his wife, and how she wanted to reject it but couldn't. And so there's a strengthening. There's something that's happening where people are rejecting this type of thing of the Muslim faith, and there's a revival of Muslims going towards Jesus. A ton. It's been going on for decades.
Absolutely.
There's people running away from this.
Well, it's akin to, from, I'm not an expert, and you know far more about the Muslim world than I do, but I think that they would differentiate between Islam and being a Muslim.
Yeah.
In the sense that, if someone asked you if you're a Baptist and you're not a Baptist, you'd say,
Yeah.
I'm a Christian, right? We are very, very particular about the denominations and the way that we're described. So why wouldn't we afford that to a different faith? Jamie Winship is someone that's been probably one of the best voices for evangelism, especially with respect for the Muslim cultures. And this whole idea of us versus them, this extraction method of getting people to convert. And for Muslims, they're sitting there going, I don't want to convert if it means like you're just extracting me and then you're going to show me off and peddle me as like the Muslim convert. And one of the scriptures that he points to is Corinthians, where it recognizes that, because there are a lot of people that were new converts in the church in the New Testament that were leaving their husbands. And Paul was saying, don't leave your husband, even if he's not a believer. Slaves, don't leave your master, even though you have freedom in Christ. And it was the idea of you don't have to leave your world behind. You need to have your witness shine. So Christians should be very, very comfortable with the idea of Muslims that are walking with Christ, because that's what's going to transform the land. That gets back to the thesis of how do you get away from this ethnic cleansing, this battle along, what tribe you belong to, and allow people to change and transform their culture, because you've got a strong enough belief that Jesus is going to show up right before a Muslim, as much as he showed up in your life or my life. Like, Jesus to me is big enough that he can do that. And for whatever reason, there's a lot of Christians that don't believe that Christ is pursuing our Muslim brothers as much as he's, pursuing you in a suburb somewhere in the United States. And so it's amazing to see what's going on. And in some respects, the faith of Muslims puts the faith of many American Christians to shame. We don't take things at face value. Everything's a debate. Everything is about a rational discussion. And he's showing up in ways that are so powerful that people are willing to lay down their lives for the Lord in a real meaningful way.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. David, thanks for coming on, brother. I really appreciate it. I love the conversation. Just for the context of what everybody's saying is like, somebody said, I don't know how you get around, so Chris said this, I don't know how you get around the incompatibility between Islam and Christianity. But by the way, I think there's the same incompatibility of Judaism and Christianity, just so we're clear.
or incompatibility with Christianity and nominal Christianity.
Yes,
it's
and
the same thing.
Yeah.
Right. So it's incompatible, but any position that where you do not bend the knee. There are people that have created their own Christianity that says, I appreciate what Judeo-Christianity has provided from a semblance of stability. That's not Christianity either. You're still going to go to hell if the only thing that you're doing is appreciating the stability that a Christian nation provides. That doesn't get you in either. That's incompatible with Christ's teaching, even though you're not out there cutting people's heads off or saying death to Christianity. The end result's the same. So, I mean, the American Christian church has a lot of work that it needs to do, and it better start looking at Muslims as image bearers and a class of human that we should be pursuing, that they get to know the Savior. And if that's not in your heart, geez, I'll tell you this, everything about Christ that I read about in the scriptures is he's all about connection. He's not about rejecting. He's not about pushing you out. He's about bringing you in. And we got to get better at that.
No, I totally agree. There is no hate like a Christian's love. Right? Because we're really good at hating on people in a way where we're telling them that just accept Jesus right now. I'm just going to just beat it into you. I love when people tell me that, Joe, that's not very Christian of you. And I'm like, all right, my right hook is really good too.
Yeah. Well, we are caught up with the idol of doctrine. We think doctrine saves.
Yeah.
And doctrine doesn't save. Jesus saves. And look to the thief on the cross. He didn't take a catechism class. He got in. He didn't even know who Jesus was. He knew he was a sinner, and that guy that was on the cross right next to him wasn't, and that got him in.
And we have some things that we have to push through. You have the 7 books of the Catholic faith that are not, the Maccabees, the 1, the 2, the Wisdoms, all those books, right? Which, then how do you reconcile that with the Pentecostal Bible, adding those extra books? I've been studying those books now, by the way, just to understand the differences between them and what they bring to the table. So, there's a lot of conflict in the faith of Christianity as well that fundamentally comes back to, I always say, when I was over in the Middle East, it always came back to the Gospels for me, right? And that if I could get Muslims to accept the Gospels, which they do, it's in the Quran, then I was there, because that means that they had to understand the origins of Jesus, right? The stories of Jesus, the crucifixion of Jesus, the miracles of Jesus, the Ruh Allah, the Spirit of God being breathed into Mary. So, once you get to that place, it becomes easier to have a conversation with people of different faiths, even, Sikhs or Buddhists and things like that. So
it's happening, and we should be rejoicing that it's happening. Amen, brother.
Yeah, amen. Do you want to pray us out? I'd love for you to pray us out if you could.
Would love to.
All right.
Dear Lord, we give everything to you. And first we give you our thanks and our gratitude that you are steadfast in your character, that you are more concerned about justice and truth than anyone, because your Son is the truth. So I pray, Lord, that you would give us humility and love and a steward's heart, that we can all play a role in serving the King of righteousness, and that we wouldn't shriek from the fight, that we wouldn't run away from obstacles, but that we would run towards everything that needs an alleviation of suffering, and we can do that as image bearers of Christ. We pray for Tina Peters, and in the faith that she'll be released and she'll shine for this country and this nation. We pray for President Trump. We pray for godly foreign policy, that evil would be exterminated, and yet innocent life, to the degree that you can discern what is innocent, would be spared. We pray for the Iranian people just as much as we pray for the people of Israel that ultimately their hope and salvation is in you and nothing else, not in regional conflict, not in bad blood, that a future of prosperity all clings on them seeing you for who you are. So, Lord, we pray that you would give us the mind of Christ, wisdom on how to articulate the conflict that we're in, and that we would never be petty in the way that we see the loss of human life. Instead, that we would pray in earnest that you would bring about a great, great ending for both the peoples of Israel and Iran, and that we would see something that we haven't seen in our lifetimes, which would be peace. We lift all of these things up to you in the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. Amen.
Amen. Brother, it was great. I know we went long, and I don't regret a minute of it.
Well, let's do it again, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody knows how to follow David, but you can catch him on X at the Prof Record.
The Prof's Record.
Prof's Record.
Yeah.
And then obviously Substack is where you can catch up on. You can become a member of his Substack, which is awesome. And you can also go to theprofessorsrecord.com. So there's the gives you all the stuff. David, thank you very much. Love you, brother.
Thanks,
Much
Joe.
love to you. And I look forward to seeing you soon.
All right. Love you too. Take care.
God bless you. All right. Well, I've done a bunch of interviews, and I got to go to a thing tonight that I'm going to go. It's another meeting for Republicans, and watch people fight with each other over stupid stuff. I hope that doesn't happen tonight. I am listening to you guys in the comments. I want to just tell you that there is no wrong answer, and I don't have the answer any more than I think anyone else does. But we spend a lot of time studying it. David spends a lot of time studying it. It's iron sharpening iron, and we have an immense amount of experience. I certainly have a bunch of experience over in the Middle East specifically. And I talk about the radical elements of every religion because I think it's important, because so often we have Christians that get run off the plantation by other Christians, and we have the Jewish faith and being called anti-Semitic because we call people out for their bad behavior. I've done this in the state of Colorado, where I talk out the people that are in positions of power in the state is captured by these synagogue of Satan, not Jews, but people that are Jewish. In other words, they're faithless atheists that are doing real harm to people. And we talk about good versus evil, and we have to be able to differentiate that. You know, a person that calls himself a Jew first, and then puts together behaviors and says, I don't believe in God, and then says, I can hide behind being a Jew and you're being anti-Semitic, is disingenuous to the reality of who they are. They're serving demonic means. They're promoting, as we talked about in the first part, the very thing, the very essence of this ridiculousness that we find ourselves debating on a regular basis. So I'm going to put out some stuff on Substack. I decided that I'm going to start putting more stuff out on Substack so you can hear videos and things that I'm going to be doing. Yeah, so look forward to that. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and more. Go to text 895, text freedom. Is it freedom? To 89517? Freedom. Text freedom to 89517 if you haven't gotten any text messages. And you can go to the website and sign up to get some stuff from us. I am going to set a thing up so that we have some Q&A, and you can join just a club where we can sit around and have conversations together. And I've got a couple of new sponsors that are coming on board, and I'm not going to change the format of what we do. We're going to do it 5 days a week. I'm going to incorporate Patrick more into what we're talking about when it comes to education. And frankly, there's a lot to be said, and we want to be able to share that knowledge and get some guests on that can go through that as well. So we're going to take a very unique stab at the type of people we have on. I've got a guy that is getting ready to serve 15 years in prison. He was a gang member. Had a conversation with him day before yesterday. I'm going to have him on the show because he's deeply involved still in that dark tunnel. And he'd say, well, Joe, why would you bring that to us? it's super important to understand how people get to a place where they are, and then you can understand how really rotted and bad this apparatus of government is, and the fact that it steals people's ability to have opportunity and joy in the future. It's like a vampire. So anyway, some great stuff we're going to be having coming on. So I look forward to seeing you guys. God bless you, and have a great day. I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Rising from the fight for the forgotten and the free, exposing rigged machines, Kuma's lies, Dominion's deceit, pays a grand each day, shielding truth from corrupt halls, but he won't back down, standing tall through it all. Argentina Peters break the chains that bind her tight, hand count votes and one day bring the fraud to light. No more mailing scams, no machines to steal the night, restore the people's voice, make Colorado right. Governor Oltmann, lead us bold and true, badass for the have-nots, fighting through and through. Abolish property tax, cut the tolls away, shrink the bloated state, let the people have their say. It's our rally call, truth and freedom rise and watch the tyrants fall. Untamed Colorado, strong and proud, we'll be one man for the people, set our great state free. Help the single moms, bring back trade school strong, opportunity for youth, where the brave belong. Audit every NGO, ban the wolves that roam, reclaim our stolen land, bring the power home. Eric Kuma's fraud, Dominion's rigged design, expose the stolen votes, cross a dangerous line. No more victimhood, no chains on you and me. He's running for governor for real liberty. Smash the fraud machine, pardon heroes jailed for the have-nots. Rising truth will never fail. One warrior defies the corrupt elite. Colorado reborn, strong on our feet. Governor Oltmann, lead us bold and true, badass for the have-nots, fighting through and through. Abolish property tax, cut the tolls away, shrink the bloated state, let the people have the say. Governor Oltmann, it's our rally call, truth and freedom rise and watch the tyrants fall. Untamed Colorado, strong and proud, we'll be one man for the people, set our great state free. Governor Oltmann, lead us bold and true. Governor Oltmann, freedom forever, Colorado rise. Rise up untamed, in the heart of the fight where the wild ones roam. Joe Oltmann's calling, bringing truth back home. From conservative daily to this untamed fire, we shatter the silence, lifting spirits higher. No chains can hold us, no lies can prevail. Authentic and fearless on this rugged trail. Patriots gather under stars and stripes. Untamed nation, igniting the night. Untamed nation, let the truth roll out in this land of the free. Standing proud from sea to shining sea, we won't back down. Catch the fire, wear the crown. Untamed nation, it's our battle song, motivating hearts where the brave belong. Yeah, untamed and wild, forever strong. Play it again all night long. leads the untamed crew. Truth matters through and through. Untamed nation, let the truth roll out in this land of the free. Standing proud from sea to shining sea, we won't back down. Catch the fire, wear the crown, tame nation. It's our battle song, motivating hearts where the